Dr. Ethan Pierce never believed in the supernatural, until the day he died. Plummeting into an abyss beneath Antarctica, his body was crushed by ice, his pulse gone for 12 minutes. But what he saw beyond death defied science itself. Jesus appeared, revealing a shocking truth: the Antarctic ice walls are not natural, but divine seals imprisoning something ancient and unspeakable. Now, back from the dead, Ethan must warn the world before the deception begins.
My name is Dr. Ethan Pierce, and what I'm about to tell you could cost me my life. For years, I have dedicated my existence to science, logic, and empirical evidence. As a geophysicist specializing in polar research, my work revolved around understanding the Earth's most extreme environments. I never believed in the supernatural. I dismissed conspiracies and laughed at claims of hidden truths beneath Antarctica's ice. But then I died and everything changed. I never imagined I'd be here, writing this testimony, exposing secrets that powerful people do not want revealed. Even now, I hesitate. I know the risks. They are watching. They do not want the truth reaching you. I've seen how others have been silenced, discredited, or made to disappear for speaking out. Some have tried to warn us before, but their voices were buried under a flood of ridicule and official explanations. I was one of them once, one of the skeptics. I believed in what could be measured, observed, and verified. But in February 2025, during a classified Antarctic expedition, I came face to face with something beyond human comprehension. Something that had been buried for millennia. Something we were never meant to find. And when I died that day, I learned the terrifying truth. It wasn't an accident. It wasn't just another tragic expedition failure. It was a warning, a final message from beyond the veil, one that you need to hear before it's too late. I know how this sounds. If I had read these words a year ago, I would have dismissed them instantly. I would have rolled my eyes, labeled this as another sensationalized hoax, another fringe theory for internet conspiracy forums. But I saw what lies beneath the ice. And I spoke with him, with Jesus Christ himself, who showed me the deception that is coming upon the world. I was clinically dead for 12 minutes. In that time, I was shown the true nature of Antarctica. What has been hidden from humanity for generations, and why the world's most powerful organizations are working tirelessly to control the narrative. This is not a game. The deception is already underway. The conditioning has begun. In the coming months, you will see major announcements about Antarctica, scientific discoveries, unprecedented findings, perhaps even whispers of extraterrestrial contact. But you must not believe what they tell you. The truth is far darker, and if you aren't prepared, you will be led astray. I don't know how much time I have before they silence me too, but before that happens, I need to tell you everything. What I saw, what's coming, and what you must do to survive what's ahead. Because once the seal is broken, there will be no turning back. I never questioned why certain regions of Antarctica were off limits. It was common knowledge among scientists that there were government-restricted zones, areas where research permits were nearly impossible to obtain. The official reason? Environmental protection and geopolitical treaties. But I now know those were lies. In late 2024, I was selected to lead a high-priority research team to one of these no-go zones. Our mission: to investigate unexplained electromagnetic anomalies detected beneath the ice. These signals were unlike anything recorded before, fluctuating at low frequencies that defied known geological activity. They moved as if responding to something. Our team was small but elite, hand-picked scientists, engineers, and military personnel under the guise of a geological survey. I should have questioned why our team included operatives from intelligence agencies, men who carried weapons instead of scientific instruments. But at the time, I was too focused on the data to care. The site we were headed to had been classified for decades. No civilian research teams had ever been granted access. The project was funded by an undisclosed government agency with oversight that extended far beyond the standard protocols of the Antarctic Treaty. We were given clearance levels higher than anything I had encountered in my career, and yet we were kept in the dark about what we were really looking for. The first thing that stood out was the security. Upon arrival at our base, a high-tech station built into the ice far from known research outposts, we were met by armed personnel. This was not a standard scientific mission. Every transmission was monitored, and we were given strict non-disclosure agreements. Our findings were to be reported only to designated officials. And there was something else. I noticed a second team, separate from us, engineers, geophysicists, and what appeared to be archaeologists. They weren't drilling for ice cores or studying climate change. They were searching for something buried beneath us. They knew what they were looking for. I asked one of the other scientists about it, a glaciologist named Dr. Patel. He looked nervous, hesitant, before whispering, "They found something under the ice years ago, but they won't tell us what." That was the first time I felt it, the unease, the sense that we weren't simply gathering data. We were uncovering a secret. The equipment we had access to was beyond anything I had ever worked with. We weren't using standard geological drilling rigs. Instead, we had classified borehole systems capable of cutting through miles of ice at impossible speeds. The technology seemed decades ahead of what should have been available. We had sensors detecting deep thermal activity, ground-penetrating radar, GPR, scanning for underground voids, and autonomous drones designed to navigate through ice tunnels. It felt more like an extraterrestrial excavation than an Earth-based research mission. The more we drilled, the stranger things became. Our instruments started glitching. GPS signals flickered, communications were disrupted, and our radios picked up eerie distortions. At first, we dismissed it as interference from geomagnetic activity, but deep down, we knew something wasn't right. The air felt charged, like a silent storm brewing beneath us. One night, I overheard a conversation between two military personnel. "They're getting too close," one of them said. "We were told to keep this contained. If they find it, I couldn't hear the rest, but that was the moment I knew we weren't just scientists exploring the unknown. We were pawns in something much bigger." There was a reason the world's most powerful nations had agreed to keep Antarctica's secrets buried. A reason why maps of certain regions were classified, why satellites were forbidden from imaging specific locations. The electromagnetic anomalies, the hollow cavities, the impossible heat signatures we detected, they weren't natural. And then we hit something that shouldn't have been there. A massive structure buried miles below the ice, a perfect geometric formation not shaped by nature. My hands trembled as I stared at the radar scans. Sharp angles, symmetrical walls, a city-sized complex, dormant and untouched. And then, for the first time in my career, I felt fear. What had we just uncovered? Little did I know this was only the beginning. At first, the signals were subtle. Minor fluctuations in electromagnetic readings, small inconsistencies in our data that could have easily been dismissed as instrumental noise. But as the days passed, it became impossible to ignore. Something beneath the ice was emitting a pattern, an intelligent, structured frequency that defied all geological explanations. These low-frequency vibrations pulsed through the ice, deep and rhythmic, like a heartbeat buried miles beneath us. The signals weren't random, they shifted, responded as if something was aware of us. Then came the malfunctions. At first, it was small things. Our GPS units lagging, readings jumping wildly as if we were in two places at once. Our satellite uplink failed intermittently, something that shouldn't have happened in such clear atmospheric conditions. Then it got worse. One morning, our ground-penetrating radar, GPR, refused to stabilize. We rebooted it multiple times, but instead of clear scans, the screen showed erratic waveforms flickering between extreme peaks and total blackness. It was as if something was interfering, distorting the data before we could even analyze it. When we switched to thermal imaging, we detected heat signatures where there should have been none. Underneath layers of ice thousands of years old, there were pockets of warmth, almost as if something was generating energy below us. Then came the voices. Our communications systems, once crystal clear, began picking up strange distortions. At first, it sounded like static, unusual, but nothing extraordinary. But as we continued drilling, the static changed. It became whispers. At first, we assumed it was radio feedback, a byproduct of the electromagnetic anomalies we were detecting. But then we noticed something that made my blood run cold. The whispers only came through when we were near the drill site. The deeper we went, the clearer they became. I remember the exact moment I heard it myself. I was standing near one of our monitoring stations, adjusting a frequency tuner, when my earpiece crackled, and through the static, I heard it, "Leave now." I froze. The words were clear, unmistakable, spoken in a voice that was neither male nor female. I ripped my headset off, my heart pounding. I wasn't the only one who heard them. Others on the team reported strange phrases, murmurs, sometimes even laughter, faint, distant, but undeniably real. A few of us started feeling sick, migraines, dizziness, an unshakable sensation of being watched. One of our technicians, a hardened engineer who had worked in extreme environments his entire career, suddenly refused to go near the excavation site. "Something's wrong down there," he said, his voice trembling. "We shouldn't be doing this." I wanted to dismiss it. I wanted to believe it was just stress, exhaustion, or an undetected geological anomaly. But deep down, I knew the truth. We had disturbed something that wanted us gone. The morning of February 12th, 2025, felt different. The air was too still, the sky too pale, as if the continent itself was holding its breath. A part of me wanted to stay inside the research station, to ignore the growing sense of unease in my chest. But I pushed the thought aside, attributing it to exhaustion and stress. After all, we were scientists, not ghost hunters. We were drilling deeper than ever before, targeting the precise location where the electromagnetic pulses had been strongest. By now, we were picking up consistent vibrations, like a distant drumbeat, echoing from miles beneath us. By 11:30 a.m., our team had gathered near the borehole site, watching as the drill descended deeper into the ice, carving its way into the unknown. The machines hummed and roared, their vibrations rippling through the frozen landscape. I stood near the edge of the excavation trench, adjusting my readings, trying to make sense of the erratic data streaming in. Then, at 11:42 a.m., everything changed. A sudden, deafening crack rang through the air. I barely had time to react. The solid ice beneath my feet fractured like brittle glass, and before I could move, the ground simply gave way. I felt myself plummeting into darkness, my stomach lurching as gravity took control. Ice and snow tumbled with me, jagged shards slicing my thermal suit, the world above disappearing in an instant. For a split second, I thought I could grab onto something, anything, but there was nothing. Only the sensation of falling, accelerating, plunging into a black void. I heard the distant shouts of my team, their screams muffled by the rushing wind as I fell deeper and deeper into the abyss. And then impact. I hit the ice hard. There was no time to process the pain, just a sickening crunch, followed by a sensation of cold unlike anything I had ever known. Not just cold, something more. A crushing force, an unnatural weight pressing down on my chest as if something ancient and unseen had been waiting for me down here. I gasped for air, but the freezing wind ripped it from my lungs. My vision blurred, my limbs numbed, my heartbeat slowed. Everything around me was silent. Not just the absence of sound, something deeper, an unnatural void where even my own thoughts seemed muted. And then, I felt myself slipping away. Suddenly, I was no longer in my body. I hovered above, weightless, staring down at my own broken form, sprawled lifelessly against the ice. My leg was twisted at an unnatural angle, my helmet cracked, exposing part of my frozen face. Blood stained the snow around me, its deep red color stark against the endless white. I should have been terrified. I should have fought to wake up, to breathe again, to cling to life. But instead, I felt calm, detached, as if the moment my body died, something far greater had taken over. Above, my team was rushing to the edge of the fissure, peering down, calling my name. Their faces were filled with horror, shock, disbelief. "Ethan, can you hear me? Jesus Christ, he's not moving. Get the rope now." I watched as they scrambled to set up a rescue line, their voices tinged with fear and urgency. But it was already too late. I was gone. The life I had so meticulously built, the scientific career I had sacrificed everything for, the years of dedication to reason and logic, all of it meant nothing now. Because death had come for me, and I was about to learn the terrifying truth about what lay beyond the ice. I hovered above my body, staring down at the lifeless form sprawled across the jagged ice. It was an eerie sight. My limbs were twisted, my helmet cracked, a thin mist of frozen breath no longer escaping my lips. I should have been panicking. I should have been clawing my way back into that broken shell of a body, desperate to breathe again. But instead, I felt detached, not numb, not afraid, just aware. I watched as my team scrambled above, their voices frantic. "He's not moving. Get the damn rope down there. We need med evac now." But even as I saw their desperation, I knew it was pointless. I was gone. I wasn't in that body anymore. And then, something shifted. Out of the periphery of my vision, I saw figures, not my team, not human. They stood at the edge of the fissure, motionless, watching me. They were tall, robed in flowing light, radiating an energy that was both powerful and gentle. Their faces were obscured, but their presence was overwhelming. A force that carried weight, purpose, and ancient authority. I should have been afraid, but instead, I felt a strange pull toward them. And that's when I noticed the others. Behind my team, moving in the shadows just beyond their sight, were figures of a different kind. Dark, twisted, shifting as if they were made of smoke and void. They slithered around my panicked colleagues, their movements unnatural, their very presence causing the air to feel heavier, colder. They weren't just watching, they were feeding, on fear, on death, on despair. One of them moved close to Dr. Patel, whispering something into his ear. I saw him shudder, his face twisting in subconscious dread, unaware of the entity looming over him. They had no power over me. Not now, not outside my body, but they infested the world of the living, hidden in places we never think to look. And then the radio crackled. Through the static of my team's emergency transmissions, something else broke through. A voice. Distorted, distant, and yet crystal clear in my mind. You were not meant to see this. The words weren't spoken in a single voice. It was a chorus, a layered, unnatural distortion, as if multiple beings were speaking through one channel. Then another voice, different, deeper. It is beginning. My team didn't react. They couldn't hear it, but I could. And as I turned my gaze back to the glowing figures standing at the edge of the fissure, I knew I was being called somewhere else. Somewhere beyond the ice. Somewhere I was never meant to return from. As I hovered above my body, watching the chaos unfold around my lifeless form, something shifted in the very fabric of reality. A force, gentle yet undeniable, began pulling me upward. It wasn't like being lifted by wind or gravity, it was as if I was being drawn towards something greater, beyond comprehension. Then, the light appeared. It wasn't just bright, it was alive. A tunnel of radiant energy opened above me, stretching infinitely in both directions. But it wasn't empty. The light itself was a presence filled with a warmth and peace so profound, so overwhelming that I forgot everything else. The pain, the fear, the mystery of what lay beneath the ice. For the first time, I felt completely whole. As I was drawn upward, I realized that this was not simply a tunnel. It was a threshold, a gateway between two realities. Then I felt him before I even saw him. A presence so powerful, so immense, yet infinitely gentle. It filled every fiber of my being, every doubt, every fear. It was like being reunited with something I had always known but had somehow forgotten. And then he was there. Jesus. There is no way to describe his face. It was both familiar and beyond human comprehension. His eyes held eternity itself, like deep wells of love and sorrow intertwined. His presence radiated authority, compassion, and truth not as an abstract concept, but as something more real than anything I had ever known. I could barely stand in his presence, yet I felt no fear, only an overwhelming sense of belonging. He spoke, and his voice was unlike anything I had ever heard, not just sound, but truth itself woven into existence. You were not meant to die yet. There is something you must see. I couldn't respond. I couldn't even think. My very soul was unraveling before him, every moment of my life laid bare in his presence. He reached out his hand, and the moment his light touched me, I saw everything. In an instant, I was no longer in the tunnel. I was standing above the earth, looking down on it, not from space, not like a satellite image, but through eyes that saw the truth behind the illusion. The world was not as we believed it to be. I saw Antarctica, but not as a barren wasteland of ice. Instead, it was a fortress, a seal, covering something far older and far more dangerous than mankind could comprehend. I turned to Jesus, my voice trembling. "What is this? What are you showing me?" His eyes, filled with both love and sorrow, met mine. The world is being deceived. And in that moment, I knew this was only the beginning. I stood beside Jesus, yet I no longer felt the constraints of my human body. It was as if I had been unshackled from time, from limitation, from the very laws of physics themselves. I was no longer in the tunnel of light. I was somewhere higher, somewhere beyond human perception. And before me stretched the earth itself. But it was not the earth I had studied all my life. This was not the world as seen from satellites or telescopes. This was the world as it truly was, seen through divine eyes. My gaze was drawn to Antarctica, the vast, ice-covered continent I had devoted my career to studying. But now I saw it as it was meant to be seen. The continent glowed, a strange, ethereal energy pulsing beneath its frozen surface. What I had once believed to be random ice formations and glacial structures were actually perfectly symmetrical, deliberate, engineered. I saw walls, colossal barriers of ice, rising from the depths of the earth and stretching for miles in every direction. They weren't natural. They were placed there. These walls were never meant to be crossed. Jesus' voice was both sorrowful and firm, resonating through me in a way that words never could. I turned to him, confusion filling my mind. "You mean the Antarctic ice walls? The natural formations?" He looked at me, and in that single gaze, I understood how foolish my question was. "They are not natural," Jesus said, his voice like thunder wrapped in gentleness. "They were placed here by my Father's decree to seal what lies beneath." A wave of horrified realization crashed over me. All my life, I had believed that Antarctica was merely a scientific enigma, a frozen desert of rock and ice. But I had been wrong. The walls, the very ones that had kept explorers and scientists at bay for centuries, were not barriers of nature. They were a divine prison. "What is beneath?" I whispered, though I already feared the answer. Jesus extended his hand, and suddenly my vision expanded. The ice vanished, as if it had never been there. And beneath it, stretching for miles in every direction, was a buried civilization. Not ruins, not the remnants of some forgotten human settlement. Something far older, far more alien. Colossal structures, unlike anything built by mankind, pulsed with an unnatural energy. Geometrically impossible towers, vast labyrinthine tunnels, and an aura of deep, suffocating wrongness permeated the underground city. And at the center of it all, there was a great chasm, a void darker than the absence of light itself. From within that abyss, something moved, something that should never have been disturbed. This is why the world was kept away. Jesus' voice carried a deep sadness, as if he knew what was coming, and that it could no longer be stopped. Mankind, in its arrogance, is about to break the seal. I saw visions of the near future. Scientists drilling deeper, uncovering fragments of what lay hidden, slowly revealing it to the world. Governments calling it the greatest archaeological discovery of all time. Leaders embracing the findings, claiming it as proof of humanity's lost origins. But it was all a deception. They will not call it what it truly is, Jesus said. They will present it as a revelation, a new chapter for mankind, a gift, but it is a lie. The world would be deceived, led to believe that what was beneath Antarctica was a key to enlightenment, to power, to evolution. But it was nothing of the sort. It is a key, Jesus continued, but not to enlightenment. It is a key to their release. My heart pounded as I watched scientists unknowingly break the final barrier as the darkness beneath stirred, as the first shadows began to rise. I turned to Jesus, desperate. How do we stop this? His expression was both sorrowful and resolute. You cannot stop it. Despair gripped me, but then he placed a hand on my shoulder and warmth surged through me. But you can warn them. Suddenly, the vision shattered. The ice returned. The light around us dimmed. And I felt myself being pulled away, back toward my body, back toward the world I had left behind. And as I fell, his final words echoed through my soul, tell them the truth. Before it's too late. I fell. Not back into my body, not yet. I was plummeting through time, through layers of existence, through the veil that had kept mankind blind for millennia. And as I fell, I saw it. The buried city beneath Antarctica. It wasn't made of stone or ice, nor did it resemble anything human hands had ever constructed. The structures twisted, shifted, pulsating as if alive, refusing to conform to natural geometry. The longer I looked, the more impossible it became to comprehend. I wasn't just seeing a city. I was witnessing something far older than human civilization itself. The architecture defied logic, colossal towers spiraled in directions that broke the laws of physics, curving inward and outward at the same time. Bridges hovered in the air without support, while deep trenches of liquid darkness pulsed as if breathing. Nothing was static. The entire city was in a constant state of change, like it was adapting, reacting, waiting. At the center, towering above all else, was a massive cyclopean fortress. It was unlike anything I had ever seen, its surface carved with ancient symbols, shifting and writhing as though they were trying to escape the stone itself. And then I felt them. Beneath the fortress, within massive blackened tombs, something stirred. They weren't dead. They weren't sleeping. They were waiting. Their presence radiated outward, ancient, malevolent, intelligent, beyond human understanding. I couldn't see them directly, but I felt their consciousness pressing against my own, studying me with a hunger that was not physical, but spiritual. Do you feel it? Jesus' voice echoed through me, a steadying force against the chaos of the vision. I turned to him, my voice barely above a whisper. What are they? He looked upon the city with immeasurable sorrow. They were once mighty. They were once beautiful. My breath caught. The fallen. A flood of understanding struck me like a tidal wave. These were not aliens. These were not lost civilizations. These were the ancient ones, the Nephilim, the remnants of a rebellion so cataclysmic that God himself cast them into the depths of the earth. And here, beneath Antarctica, they had been imprisoned. For ages, they had been locked away, their influence suppressed, their power restrained. But the seal was weakening. Not by time, but by human hands. Suddenly, I saw decades of hidden knowledge unfold before me. Secret societies, world leaders, high-ranking military officials, all of them had known about this place. They had found fragments of the truth records hidden in ancient texts, in forbidden scrolls, in whispers passed down through bloodlines of power. They had spent decades preparing the world, crafting a deception so perfect that when the time came, humanity would embrace its own undoing. They would call it a discovery. They would call it contact. They would say it was a gift to mankind. But they knew the truth. They weren't accidentally uncovering this place. They were following a script. Deep beneath the ice, I felt the first stirrings of their awakening. The ground rumbled, not like an earthquake, but like a pulse, a heartbeat that had been still for far too long. They were aware of us now. The drills, the electromagnetic signals, the human presence, it had triggered something. And when the final seal was broken, they would rise once more. I turned back to Jesus, my soul trembling. How do we stop this? His expression was solemn, yet firm. You cannot. My heart pounded. Then what do we do? His eyes, filled with infinite wisdom, met mine. Warn them. Suddenly, the vision shattered. I felt myself being pulled away, spiraling back toward my body, the radiant light around Jesus growing distant, fading, and as I fell, I heard his final words echoing through my soul, the greatest deception is coming. Tell them before it is too late. I was falling. The vision of the buried city, the ancient seals, and the imprisoned entities faded into darkness as I was pulled back. But before I returned to my body, Jesus showed me one final revelation: how the world would be deceived. It would not happen suddenly. It would be carefully orchestrated. I saw the future unfold as if watching a movie. Governments and scientific institutions would begin releasing small pieces of information about their discoveries in Antarctica. At first, it would seem harmless, announcements about unexpected anomalies, ancient ruins, and biological findings beneath the ice. Then, the first major revelation would be made public. We have discovered evidence of an advanced civilization beneath Antarctica. The media would sensationalize it. Experts would speculate about who they were, how they lived, and what they left behind. But the real deception would come next. The elite, those in control of the world's systems, would introduce a new narrative. This discovery changes everything. They would tell the world that these beings, whoever they were not hostile. That they were not demons, not fallen, not anything we had feared in ancient texts. Instead, they would be framed as our benefactors, as our creators. The public would be told that these entities engineered humanity long ago, shaping our evolution, guiding our progress. Every ancient religion, every belief system had misunderstood them. The world's greatest spiritual leaders, some knowingly, some deceived, would validate this revelation, saying, "This is the truth we were waiting for. The gods of old were never myths. They were our progenitors. We are finally ready to meet them again." I saw massive worldwide celebrations, people rejoicing in the streets, embracing this new chapter for humanity. The deception would be complete, but it wouldn't stop there. The entities, those once sealed beneath the ice, would be presented not just as ancient beings, but as guides for humanity's future. They have returned to help us ascend. They would promise technological advancements, solutions to disease, famine, and energy crises. They would introduce a new way of thinking, a new spiritual awakening, free from the constraints of outdated religions. People would flock to them, desperate for the knowledge they claimed to offer. The scientific community, already primed to reject the supernatural, would fall in line, presenting this as the next great step in human evolution. And then, the final deception would unfold. The world would be offered a choice, one that wouldn't seem like a choice at all. Through biotechnology, genetic modifications, or neurological enhancements, the entities would offer the next step in evolution. We can make you stronger, more intelligent, immune to disease. We can extend your life indefinitely. You no longer need to fear death. But what they wouldn't tell the world is that by accepting these gifts, People would be surrendering their very souls. They would be severed from God forever. And yet, the masses would embrace it willingly. This is not control, they would say. This is freedom. This is the future. This is what we were meant to become. No one would question it, not because they weren't allowed to, but because they wouldn't want to. Anyone who resisted, who spoke out, who tried to warn the world, would be silenced, ridiculed, or dismissed as conspiracy theorists. Even the church would be divided. Some would stand firm, warning that this was the great deception foretold in prophecy. But others would compromise. Perhaps this is what God intended all along. Perhaps this is our destiny. And just like that, the world would fall into the trap. I felt myself being ripped away from the vision, my soul screaming at the weight of what I had seen. As I was pulled back into my body, one final truth burned into my mind. The greatest lie ever told is coming, and the world is not ready for it. I felt myself plunging through time, through the fabric of reality itself. The vision of the great deception burned in my mind like an eternal scar. But what came next was even more terrifying. Jesus was still beside me, his presence the only thing keeping me from being consumed by the weight of what I was witnessing. They will not force the world to accept it, he said, his voice steady. They won't need to. They will make them want it. I saw it, the final phase of deception. The entities, once hidden beneath Antarctica, were now among the people. They walked freely, no longer myths or forbidden knowledge, but celebrated saviors. They came bearing gifts, technology that could heal sickness, restore youth, enhance the human mind beyond what was naturally possible. This is the next step in human evolution, the world's leaders would say. This is how we ascend. It would be called the gift, an upgrade, a way to transcend human limitations. The first to embrace it would be the wealthy, the powerful, the influential. Celebrities, politicians, even some religious leaders would take it publicly, praising its benefits. Imagine a world with no disease, no aging, no weakness, no suffering. We can become more than human. And the people would beg for it. But Jesus turned to me, his expression sorrowful yet firm. It is the mark. I felt a crushing sorrow as I understood what he meant. This gift, this upgrade, was not just physical. It was spiritual. Whoever accepted it would be changed forever. Not just biologically. Their very souls would be altered. They would no longer be able to hear God's voice. The connection between man and his creator would be severed. Once they take it, they will no longer be mine, Jesus said. A wave of indescribable grief washed over me as I saw people lining up to receive it, not out of fear, but out of desire. It wasn't forced upon them. It was a choice. But the choice was an illusion. Decades of conditioning had prepared them for this moment. They had been programmed to crave it, to see it not as a loss of their humanity, but as the fulfillment of it. And as each person accepted it, I saw something leave them. A light. A spark, the very essence of what made them human. Then I saw the other side, the ones who refused. The ones who saw through the deception, who clung to faith, to truth, to the warnings given before it was too late. They were hunted, not as criminals, not as enemies, but as obstacles to progress. They were pushed to the fringes of society, denied access to the very systems that now governed human life. They were called dangerous, backward, a threat to the future of mankind. And one by one, they disappeared. Not all at once, but gradually, systematically, until the world believed they had never existed at all. I turned to Jesus, desperation in my voice. How do we stop this? His gaze pierced through me, filled with an intensity one could barely withstand. You cannot stop it. My soul shattered at his words. Then what can we do? Warn them. A rush of wind whipped through my spirit, and suddenly I was being pulled away, ripped from the vision, from the presence of Jesus, from the infinite sorrow of what I had seen. The last thing I heard before the darkness took me was his voice, clear and resolute. The choice is coming. But it is no choice at all. I felt myself falling, being pulled away from the presence of Jesus, from the divine vantage point where I had seen the truth of Antarctica, the deception, the mark, and the coming choice. I didn't want to leave. I wanted to stay in that place where everything was clear, where truth wasn't hidden behind deception, where the presence of God was all-consuming. But Jesus had one final message for me. He placed his hand on my shoulder, and in that instant, I felt a power so overwhelming, so absolute, yet filled with infinite love. His voice was firm but sorrowful. You must return. You must warn them. My heart clenched. They won't believe me, I whispered. "Some will," he answered. "And that is enough." Then his expression darkened, filled with a gravity I could barely withstand. "They will silence you. Speak anyway." And then I was ripped away from him, hurtling backward through time, through space, through reality itself. The brilliant light faded. The vision of Antarctica, of the seals breaking, of the entities rising, all of it collapsed into darkness. And then I felt pain. A searing, unbearable fire ripped through my chest, my lungs, my veins. I gasped a desperate, choking breath as I was slammed back into my body. Sounds rushed in. Machines beeping. Shouts. Frantic movement. Hands pressing on my chest. "He's back." The voices were filled with shock and disbelief. 12 minutes, doctor. He was gone for 12 minutes. I opened my eyes, blinking against the sterile white glow of hospital lights. I was in a medical bay, wires attached to my skin and 4 pumping something cold into my arm. My team, scientists, doctors, government personnel, stood frozen, their faces pale, wide-eyed, disbelieving. Dr. Patel, my closest colleague, was gripping the bed rail, his knuckles white. "Ethan." His voice was barely a whisper. "We thought you were gone." I stared at him, my mind still half in the realm I had just left, half in the horror of what I had seen. I tried to speak, but my throat burned. My chest ached from the CPR compressions. A doctor, an older man with graying hair, leaned closer. "Dr. Pierce, do you remember anything?" I swallowed, my mouth dry, and then the gravity of it all crashed over me. I had seen the truth. I had spoken to Jesus Christ himself. I had been sent back with a warning, and now I was expected to pretend that none of it had happened? No, I wouldn't, couldn't. I licked my cracked lips and forced out the only words that mattered. "It's all a lie." The doctors exchanged confused glances. "What is?" Dr. Patel asked. I turned my head toward him, my voice hoarse but firm. "Antarctica, the discoveries, the awakening they're preparing us for. It's not what they say it is." I took a shaking breath. The first night back in my body, I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the visions again. The buried city, the seals breaking, the deception creeping over the world like a shadow. I had been sent back to warn them. But it didn't take long to realize that not everyone wanted the truth to be spoken. The next morning, before the sun even rose, they came. 2 men in dark suits, crisp and expressionless, entered my hospital room without introduction. They weren't doctors, scientists, or government officials I recognized. They were something else. One of them, a tall man with piercing blue eyes, pulled up a chair beside my bed. His movements were measured, deliberate. The other stood near the door, arms crossed, watching. The blue-eyed man folded his hands. "Dr. Pierce, you've been through a traumatic experience." I said nothing. 12 minutes without a pulse. That does things to the brain. We've seen cases where people experience vivid hallucinations, sometimes near-religious visions. It's common. I clenched my jaw. I knew what I had seen. He leaned in slightly. "You made some concerning statements yesterday. About Antarctica. About a deception. We'd like to understand where that's coming from." I stared at him, my pulse beginning to rise. I knew this game. This wasn't curiosity. This was containment. I met his gaze. I didn't hallucinate anything. A flicker of something, annoyance? Concern passed across his face, but it was gone just as fast. "I see." He sighed as if disappointed. "Dr. Pierce, let's be clear. You were on a classified research mission. Certain information is sensitive. We wouldn't want misunderstandings getting out to the public." There it was, the warning hidden beneath politeness. I didn't answer. The other man, still by the door, finally spoke, his voice cold, calculated. "For your safety and for the safety of those around you, we strongly recommend you forget what you think you saw." My hands gripped the hospital blanket. "And if I don't?" The blue-eyed man smiled. "But there was nothing warm about it." "Then you'll wish you had." They left without another word. I sat there, pulse hammering in my ears. I had been warned, but I wasn't about to stop. That night, just as I drifted into a restless sleep, my hospital phone buzzed. An unknown number. Hesitant, I answered. A low, hurried voice spoke. "Dr. Pierce, I don't have much time. You need to listen." I froze. "Who is this?" "That doesn't matter. But I know what you saw." A chill ran through me. "You're not wrong." I gripped the phone tighter. "They've known about it for decades. Maybe longer. They've been preparing the world, piece by piece, to accept what's coming. My breath caught. The deception? A pause. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, it's already too late. The line went dead. Days passed. Then weeks. The world outside continued as if nothing had changed. People went to work, watched their televisions, scrolled their news feeds, completely unaware of what was coming. But I saw it. The slow drip feed of disclosure had begun. At first, the stories seemed harmless enough. News outlets reported unusual heat signatures detected beneath Antarctica's ice. Scientists spoke of potentially groundbreaking discoveries. Then the headlines changed. Lost civilization under the ice? New discoveries suggest humanity's history is incomplete. Government scientists uncover strange anomalies in Antarctica. Are we ready for the truth? I watched, horrified, as they framed the narrative exactly as Jesus had warned. Instead of calling it what it truly was, a divine prison holding back an ancient evil, they called it a revelation. They weren't hiding it anymore. They were preparing the world to accept it. And the worst part? People wanted to believe it. I've tried to warn those around me. Some listen, most don't. I've told them not to trust what the media will present as truth. I've told them the deception is coming, but they laugh it off, calling it conspiracy. They say, if something was really happening, we would know. I shake my head. You're already being conditioned to accept it. I try to tell them about what I saw, what Jesus revealed to me, but their minds are already numbed by the endless barrage of news clips, expert opinions, and government statements. The programming has worked. The lie is already being woven into their reality. And then, one night, it happened. A news anchor, one of the biggest networks in the world, spoke words that made my blood run cold. In the coming months, expect a major revelation about our place in the universe. I knew what that meant. They weren't talking about Antarctica as a scientific breakthrough anymore. They were preparing the world for the arrival of those who had been sealed away. And when that day comes, the world will not resist. They will welcome them. They will worship them. They will believe every word they say, because they have been prepared to. I don't know how much longer I have. I don't know if they will come for me next. But I know this. If you are reading this, you must wake up. Do not believe what they tell you. The deception is coming. And when it does, you must choose truth or the lie, God or the false light, because once you accept the lie, there is no turning back.